This is Paul McGuire. You are watching a prophetic emergency alert. And on this emergency alert, we're going to focus in on what I would call crisis events, and then immediately go into what you and I and true believers in Jesus Christ can do about it. Right now, the stakes are very high in the United States of America, and that affects the rest of the world. America is at the precipice. It's dangling off a huge cliff. And I don't think most so-called Bible-believing Christians have a clue. I don't think they have clue one as to how imminent, how serious, how grave the danger is that they're in. I don't think, for example, that 87%, no, let's be generous, I don't think 80% of pastors in America, or 80% of Christian leaders in America, I don't think that they have any clue whatsoever about just how intense and just how heavy things can be very quickly in this nation. I don't think that the average Christian, the average conservative, the average churchgoer or non-churchgoer but who identifies themselves as a Christian, I don't think that the average Christian in America has even the remotest conception of what could, on a historical basis, the likelihood of the following things I'm going to mention is percentage-wise it's through the roof. The likelihood that we could have an economic collapse, that we could have a totalitarian dictatorship, either soft or hard, that we could lose our freedoms, that we would never see an election again where voting had any integrity whatsoever, that we don't have some kind of social revolution in our nation, and things like this. You would think that Christians, just based on their own self-interest, would have enough intelligence to recognize that they are in great danger. The spirit of Antichrist, which is different than the Antichrist in Revelation. Antichrist in Revelation is a capital A. The spirit of Antichrist is the spirit of Antichrist all in lowercase letters. Antichrist is lower case. The spirit of Antichrist has penetrated our nation over 100 years ago in a very serious manner. And how anybody can recognize whether or not the spirit of Antichrist has broken through into a nation is the following. If you see society, technology, the wealthy, the banking institutions, the major corporations, the religious institutions, the politicians, the elite, etc., in our nation, the comedians, the mainstream media, if you see a unifying of those different spheres of influence, and if you see them go into a constant, all-out, 24/7 attack mode, where they're constantly belittling, perverting, debasing, attacking, mocking Christianity, Judaism, and on top of it, all Christian biblical moral values are not respected. They're mocked and ridiculed. And now profiling is going on by our government, where people are being electronically spied on through algorithms, and they're compiling files of people who, let's say, believe in the Bible, who claim to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Do not think for a moment that that is some delusional, paranoid fantasy. That is exactly what is happening. Remember, when the Jews in Nazi Germany were first confronted with the rumors and the buzz on the streets about exactly what Hitler and the Nazis were up to, it blew their mind. So in a self-protective mechanism, they shut down their mind as a way of sealing themselves off to the reality of demonic attacks through Hitler. And so they literally said, this is the most common of Jewish expressions in World War II, Nazi Germany. They kept saying, when they heard about Hitler and the atrocities, they kept saying, it can't happen here. It can't happen here. In other words, denial. Denial. Okay? Psychological denial is an ancient psychological principle that's built into man. Things are so dangerous, so evil, so you just shut down and you pretend you can't see it. Okay, so what were the Jews in Nazi Germany denying? They were denying that the existence and functioning of the death camps, which consisted of ovens where they burned alive where they burned alive Jews in the ovens. Okay, like Auschwitz and places like that, the concentration camps, where they gassed to death millions of Jews in the gas chambers. Okay, but in both of these methods of mass execution that were committed against the Jews' psychological response, even as they were being taken on railroads, on railroad cars, even as they were taken on railroad cars right into the concentration camps where they could see the big smoke towers and the smoke of burning human flesh coming out in the atmosphere. Even after seeing all that, and then you see the giant gas chambers or the giant ovens, which, the interior was hidden, but you knew something ominous was there. They kept saying, it can't happen here. And even as it was going on in the interior of the concentration camps, they couldn't believe it. So incrementally, bit by bit, they finally woke up that they were in a living hell and a living nightmare. And that if they had not played mind games with themselves, if they had not allowed themselves to become delusional. You have a choice in life. We all do. We can choose to know the truth, and the truth will set us free. We can choose to have knowledge, which gives us power. Or we can choose to seek momentary escapism through fantasy and kind of hypnotizing ourselves into believing, it can't happen here. Oh, that will never happen here. And all the other mind games people play when there are things going on in their reality that are so dark and evil, but they can't deal with it in their conscious mind. Okay, here's an example. And you need to know about this. That's what I write about in my, excuse me for going to the floor here in my studio, but I want to pick up 2 books. Here's the deal, okay? When it's human nature, psychologically, when many of us are confronted with very, very hostile, unpleasant, horrific realities that we can't face, okay? We know it's happening, but if we admit to ourselves that it's happening, we could go crazy. Such was the case with the Jews in Nazi Germany. They just could not bring themselves to believe that they were being burned alive by the millions in the concentration camps, in the ovens, and that they were put into the gas chambers in the concentration camps to be gassed to death. They couldn't bring themselves to believe it, even though they knew it was a reality. Even though they could smell with their noses the stench of human flesh burning, okay, which is like supposed to be one of the most horrific smells there is. They kept saying it can't happen here. And then incrementally, as they saw it happening, as they saw what was happening right in front of their faces, and they saw more and more and more of it, the delusion, the hypnotic delusion left them, and they realized, my God, it is happening here. So what happened at the end of World War II when the Jews, many of the Jews went to the United States, many went to Jerusalem, Israel, and when the Jews returned to Israel, they no longer used the words, it can't happen here. They now replace those words with a new phraseology, which said, by any means necessary. By any means necessary to Jews meant we will do whatever it takes. We will fight unbelievably hard. We will not allow ourselves to be rounded up like animals and have our men and women, boys and girls, had mass genocide done on them. We will not allow future gas chambers, concentration camps, Adolf Hitler's, we will not allow this to happen. We will not allow ourselves to be deceived again so it happens. Okay, so let's examine that, because there's an important lesson in that to you and me as Christians. The Jews learned the lesson. It caused them, there were millions and millions of Jews that died in the Holocaust, and there were millions of Catholics and Protestants. But I think the overwhelming number was Jews that died. That woke them up from their delusional spirituality. And now they live in a posture, live in a reality where they say it can't happen here. Why? Because they are eternally vigilant. They are on the job. They learn their lesson the hard way. Who has not learned their lesson historically? When we contrast the Jews prior to Adolf Hitler and up until our contemporary moment, if we contrast the Jews with evangelical Christians, we notice there's numerous differences, but there's 2 fundamental differences in mindset and belief, which these 2 different mindsets will produce 2 different kinds of reality. Mindset number 1 is people who have not experienced persecution, annihilation, pain, murder, rape, war. They have a naivete about them. They think that the world is all, roses and flowers. And in a way, the Jews were like that when Nazi Germany was taken over. They could not believe that there were concentration camps, that Jews were being burnt, gassed to death, annihilated in the concentration camps. They couldn't believe it. So their verbal words that matched up with their state of consciousness was, it can't happen here. Then they saw it, rubbed right in their face, and after they went through the shock period, they realized it can happen here, and it is happening here now. So they fought, the Allies fought, the Jews were freed. But the Jews, because the experience was so horrific, the Jews didn't fall asleep again. They are in a state of consciousness where they're eternally vigilant, and they say among themselves in their actions and deeds, never again. Never again. So they moved from being people of God with a consciousness of denial, and after the Holocaust they moved to being people of God who can look reality in the eye and say, never again. They were transformed. It would be better for them. It would have been better for them, better for us, if they had learned the historical truth and lesson before all hell broke loose. If they said, the minute Adolf Hitler was in their proximity, never again. So they didn't have to go through the trauma of the Holocaust. It would be nice if the Christians in America learned the lesson from the Jews and bothered to learn the lesson from history. That would be nice, because then the Holocaust does not have to come to Christians. That would be nice. But because Christians, evangelical Christians, are acting like Jews did when they said it can't happen here, Christians are in denial and have accepted a delusional reality and a delusional theology of make-believe, that we can't see reality. Because what reality is communicating to anybody who's sane, rational, educated, knows history, can compare history with what's happening today in America, who's educated, even if that means self-educated. And most of all, a person who's a genuine Christian should have the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth, living inside them, giving them the supernatural ability to discern the spirits. The Holy Spirit inside us, that's to protect us from spiritual deception, false teaching, false prophets. Okay, so right now, the reason we're in such a dangerous place, this was the reason I wrote my book, by the way, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World. Available at paulmcguire.us, and you can get a financial discount by getting a book bundle. Now, the reason I wrote these books, the reason I'm giving this message, is because I was raised in an atheist household, okay? But when I was 15 years old, I was demonstrating with radical leftist revolutionaries in Manhattan, like Abby Hoffman. I was at giant demonstrations with radical activists on the left when I was 15 years old, okay? I was being my parents were atheists, liberals. I was being programmed at that time to become a radical activist, whether I majored in altered states of consciousness and filmmaking at the University of Missouri, whether I found employment in those fields or in the field of activism. I was being programmed to help bring in this one world government, okay, through higher consciousness. And I was being programmed to be kind of a political activist, bringing about this new world order, one world government, one world religion, and one world economic system. So I'm immersed in this stuff. Now, the globalist elite financed, if you're skeptical, let me tell you this, the globalist elite financed the counterculture revolution, the anti-war demonstrations of the 60s and 70s. It was financed by Rockefeller and his pals and the super capitalists. So, that's because who's really behind communism, socialism, and Marxism has always been, from the very time that Karl Marx wrote, quote, the Communist Manifesto with Frederick Engels. Karl Marx was a practicing Satanist, and his sister was head of a satanic church. So Karl Marx received monies from the Illuminati, and the Illuminati, the super elite wealthy, they financed and paid for the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, also known as the Communist Revolution, where the communists took over Russia and turned it into a hellhole. So the point is that knowledge is power, and it is not the will of God for his people to be delusional, to be deceived, to be marginalized, to lose their critical thinking faculties, because it is not the will of God that his people are made slaves. It's not the will of God that his people are slaughtered. It's not the will of God that his people are murdered. It's not. So critical to understand. It's so simple. Powerful truth is so simple. Obviously, it's not God's will for his people to suffer, die, be destroyed, and be killed. That all was part of the fall of man that Adam and Eve initiated. It's God's will, according to what his word says, it's God's will that his people are set free, that his people are not slaves, that his people are blessed, not cursed. It's God's will that his people are healed, not sick. It's God's will that his people are free and free to worship the Lord. It's not God's will for his people to be in a concentration camp. But here is the critical thing. There are massive numbers of millions of people in the United States who are being programmed by social engineers, by propaganda, by advertising, by techniques of persuasion, by scientific mind control, by lighter forms of scientific brainwashing, and an indoctrination. Mind control. Now, that's why people think the way they think in America, including Christians for the most part. That's why people do what they do, and that's why people behave like they behave, because they're programmed. They're robots. Now, God's people are not supposed to be programmed, because the Spirit of the Lord is the Holy Spirit. We're individual, free human beings. So I want to tell you, you need to go to paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us, and get yourself, save money off the books, and get yourself book bundles, featuring books like my book, The Greatest Battle, Conquering the Matrix, Prophecy, The Future of America. Save money and order book bundles at paulmcguire.us. You should do that because this will give you all the answers and the information you need that explains in simple, fast-moving terms what I've been talking to you about. So what's the bottom line? There are two forces in the universe. I was raised an atheist, so I was told that's all fairy tale. There's no forces. Because my parents did not believe in God. They did not believe in the devil. But from Christians and Jews, I heard there were two forces in the universe. There was the force of good and the force of evil. And then, even though this was hard for me to really accept this intellectually, it really was difficult. But I finally learned that the concept of a devil or Satan was not a mythology, that Satan and the devil are actual supernatural beings. They're fallen angels. Satan is the highest ranking fallen angel under God. And then below him are demons and fallen angels of various rankings, and below that there are men and women who have sold their souls to the devil. So, from the beginning of time, Satan, not from the beginning of time, before the beginning of time, first God created the world, the heavens, Adam and Eve, and God created for all mankind to live in perpetual ecstasy in paradise, living in the Garden of Eden. The only rule was, God said, don't eat from the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden. Adam and Eve violated that rule, and they pulled the cosmic trigger, which activated the law of sin and death and released the death force into the human race. Thus, mankind began to die, get sick, get ugly, war, rape, murder, and all the evil stuff in our world comes out of the evil nature of man. And how did man get this evil nature? Because modern psychology believes a lie. Modern psychology, despite all historical societal evidence, modern psychology believes the delusion that every man and woman are basically born good, and it's only their environment, their socio-psychological economic environment that makes them evil or bad. That is a very seductive fairy tale, one that I was taught when I was a young boy in the school system, public education in the school system, and by my atheist parents. And so I believed it. But I thought about it. Even though I was an atheist, I thought about it. There was a period in my time when I began to actually read the Bible, because you see, like most people who are atheists and humanists and people in the New Age, etc., I'm not trying to be unkind, but most of the people who would embody those categories of people, including witches, etc., they like to boast, like I did, about how much I knew about the Bible and how much I read the Bible. But when it really came down to it, I never read the Bible. I knew very little about the Bible. Okay? And that's the truth with most liberals, socialists, humanists, and non-believers. They love to boast about how much they know about the Bible. In fact, they know nothing about the Bible, and they don't understand any of its principles. But having come from that side, that's part of the delusion, see? Because the reason you're deluded, the reason you believe in the mythology that there is no biblical God, is because you need to have that fairy tale in order to give yourself permission or the excuse to act like, quote, God, and do anything you want to do, which means you want a license to sin and you want a license to be God. And if man is good except for his environment, then you've got a license. But the reality is, every man and woman, because of the fall of man, is born with a fallen human nature. Okay, so people are not godlike, innocent, pure, virtuous, and good before they're born. That's a lie. That's a mythology. And that lie, ideas have consequences. Good ideas have good consequences. Bad ideas have bad consequences. Because that's a bad idea, it has bad consequences. You let out serial killers from prisons prematurely, etc., and then they commit the same hideous crime. You don't recognize that people are capable of evil. They're capable of good too, but people are capable by evil. And if you don't train young children properly and with morals, they are going to walk in the ways of evil. That's why it's not an accident that the communist, Marxist, socialist strategists, also known as the Fabian socialists, who have been actively at work in the United States, the European Union, Canada, since 1917, when they founded the Frankfurt School in Frankfurt, Germany. These communist professors devised a communist revolution that would target nations like the United States. So in their outline, which I quote in my book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World, in my outline, I show you their four most important goals. The Fabian socialists, the communist revolutionaries who came to America, had four goals. Number one, their goal was to completely destroy the religion of Christianity. Number two, to destroy any concept of an absolute right or an absolute wrong or morality. Number three, nationalism and believing in America and its Constitution, and the concept of independent sovereign nations versus a global government. And then finally, patriotism. In America, we're patriotic because we have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights which flows from biblical truths and ideas. So notice that the communist revolutionaries target strategically, first of all, their biggest enemy. See, they walk around saying they're going to have a workers' paradise. They walk around saying we're going to have freedom of speech and stuff like that. We're going to have free medical care for everybody. They walk around saying, we're going to create heaven on earth, a workers' paradise. Everybody's going to share the wealth equally. They walk around, the communists, socialists, and Marxists walk around lying through their teeth about all the great things that communism, socialism, Marxism does. But historically, and I prove it, if you pick up and read my book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World, you'll read documentation of the truth of communism. And their goal, their words are that they're fully justified in doing anything to accomplish a communist revolution. So they call it by any means necessary. They give themselves, like 007, a license to kill when they say to themselves, by any means necessary. According to communists and socialists, you're allowed to do anything, lie, cheat, steal, whatever it is, it's fine because it's justified to carry out a communist revolution. Thus, by any means necessary. And so, notice what they target. What they're targeting is a Jewish Christian America. They're targeting churches. They're targeting Christians. That's the ultimate target. Okay? They want to destroy Christianity because they hate God. They're motivated by the spirit of Antichrist. They hate God with a passion. And that's why when you read my book, The Greatest Battle, and you read my book, Conquering the Matrix, which talks about mind control, Russian mind control in the U.S., hypnosis, programming people, spiritual discernment, its increase in the last days, And you can save money on these books by getting a book bundle at paulmcguire.us. So, in this fight with Satan, we're fighting delusion. Delusion and deception. Well, everything that the communists promise is a lie. It never happens. They don't deliver on any of those things. Instead, every communist revolution, without exception, has produced a dictatorship, mass murder, totalitarianism, total no freedoms, no freedom of speech, no freedom of religion, mass murders, mass rapes, mass killings, mass poverty, nothing of goodness they promised the people came true. And that is what's happening in the United States now. But you have a huge percentage of Christians, because they're not educated, because they don't read books, because they don't think and pray. They have strategically been put in a subtle state of denial, or you could say that the Christians in America have been lulled to sleep spiritually, or they're in a semi-hypnotic state. They're under the influence, to one degree or another, of scientific mind control, persuasion, brainwashing, and so they're in a altered state of consciousness. It's subtle, but you know, I studied the science of altered states of consciousness at the University of Missouri. All of that really, when you read my books on Bible prophecy, like A Prophecy of the Future of America, volumes 1 and 2, you'll notice that I go back to ancient Babylon and ancient Egypt, occultic empires, and you see that in the governmental power structure of both ancient Babylon, where the Tower of Babel was, and ancient Egypt, the Pharaoh God King and the king of emperor of Babylon, each of them had about 300 heavy-duty occult advisors and practitioners who practiced sorcery and black magic and Satanism and clairvoyance and astrology and all kinds of things. And they regularly tapped into the supernatural, and yes, they did receive supernatural answers from another dimension. Now, this is vital to grasp. So, make sure you catch the next Paul McGuire prophetic alert, the prophetic emergency alert, PERA. Make sure you catch it, because we're going to explain a secret that is being hidden from the masses. And you need to know what that secret is. And it involves the scientific access of supernatural occultic power that people in the highest levels of the elite know how to access. And God wants His people to access a superior power, one that's not demonic, so that God's people can be overcomers in the spiritual battle that's raging here in the last days. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us.